Everything is Awesome is part of Courts and Parts, a podcast network featuring pop culture, TV, movie, and geek podcasts. Check out some of our other shows, like TV Ate My Brain, Let's Chat with Revelin Friends, and Podstalgic at courtsandparts.com.
Awesome. Just tell people they're awesome and mean it.
Awesome.
Awesome. Awesome.
Did you have an awesome time? Did you drink awesome shooters and listen to awesome music and then just sit around and soak up each other's awesomeness?
Awesome. 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 That was awesome. You guys are awesome.
No,
you're awesome.
No,
you are awesome.
Sir, you are awesome. Seriously.
Awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
Everything is awesome.
Welcome to this week's edition of Everything is Awesome. I am your host, Kev, and this is the show where we sit down and talk to awesome people about awesome things. This week is our second episode in our Philadelphia Podcast Festival series of podcasts where multiple times a week I'm releasing episodes where we interview people that are doing shows during the Podcast Fest. Ironically, this is actually probably the second episode that airs during that run, but the first one that I'm recording. Last week you listened to me speak to Ophidian the Cobra during the live show that we did at Amalgam Comics and Coffee House, which was awesome. I hope you were there, because that's just a little taste of what we're going to do on July 16th at 2 p.m. when we're part of the Philadelphia Podcast Fest at Tattooed Moms. But this week we're going to be sitting here down and talking to, and I'm cheating because this is the second time we're recording the intro. So I know my guest's last name this time only because I screwed it up last time. But he is the host of the High Res Pod, graphic designer from Philadelphia. I assume from Philadelphia, yeah. Otherwise he wouldn't be part of the Philadelphia Podcast Fest. Ryan Starr, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Kev.
Yes.
What should we go back on? What were we talking about? We should circle back. I was telling you when we first started about how excited I was to talk to you tonight, just because of the fact that, and we kind of got into the fact that, like, we don't know anybody else who's into podcasting. It's something, like you talk to your friends, you get all excited about, and you're kind of like, they're like, yeah, that's great, So this is really cool. I was really looking forward to chatting with you tonight.
Yeah, podcasting is a thing where, like, if people aren't into it, like, they don't want to, like, geek out about it. And I don't listen to anything but podcasts. So, like, if I'm listening to something, it's either one of the, I don't even know how many podcasts I have on my subscription list, but it's one of those podcasts. I mean, I've gotten to the point where I have to listen to almost all of them at 1.5 times speed in order to stay current.
I'm sure you have a schedule, right? You have a schedule, right?
Oh.
Like every day you know where you're hitting, right?
No, not really, because I sometimes I will let it go like a day or two because I'm working on my own stuff. That's the problem being a creator, is that it's hard to balance creator and fan and listener when it comes to podcasting, because when you're recording a podcast, not only do you have the time, you need to put time in to record it, then you need to put time in to edit it, and then to post it, which is, kind of part of the, I guess, editing phase. But, so like it's, this hour conversation we're going to have turns into about a 2.5, 3 hour project. So that's 3 hours that I can't listen to a podcast.
That's true. Yeah. Well, it's so funny. I have an episode that's on deck for the next episode. Will be coming out in like 2 weeks from now, or maybe I guess a week from when we're talking now. And it just ran super long. And it was this guy named Rashid Zakat, and we just met him that night. And it's like, I want to be this guy's best friend. Like, we just hit it off so well. And it was funny because I didn't know how, you never know going into these conversations how they're going to go. But we started talking, and we started talking about the movie Moonlight, and that segued into the WWF. I don't know how.
Oh my God.
And from there, it was just full on. It's going to be like, usually my podcast runs a little over an hour with like intro and everything. And this one's going to easily be 2 hours. I was thinking about breaking it up. I don't know if it makes sense to break it up. I kind of feel like I just want to throw people right into it and just let them,
So I'll give you some advice on that I was given a couple months ago, probably. Because last year I was the guy that broke it up. So like I have a lot of part 1, part 2s. And then I was talking to Sean from the Horribly Awkward podcast, and he said, just throw it all up, because the only people that care about that is us as podcasters. We think that it needs to be in this little bubble of time. And I think there is a truth to that. Like people have an attention span that I think lasts about 45 minutes to an hour.
Right. And actually I worry about it in the sense of what you were talking about, having this finite amount of time. And I kind of feel like people, when they download it and they see 2 hours, are like, oh shit. I'm going to have to get in some kind of headspace to listen to this. Like I got to, you try to coordinate your commute time to when am I going to be doing dishes? Can I when can I listen to this? And because it's funny, I had this episode that came out very early on. It was actually one of these you have those episodes where you're like, oh, this is what the show is. I didn't even know what the show was until I did this episode, and now I feel like this is where I need to take the show. And it was with this guy named Kevin Jackson. We just sat down and we had a very similar conversation in the sense that it was 45 minutes into the conversation, and I hadn't even gotten around to talking about his work yet, or we were just we were talking about 9/11, and I was like, how the hell am I going to swing this back to where I need to get to? Yeah. And I realized tangents are where good podcasts live.
Absolutely.
And it was just let it go. So it ended up being almost 2 hour episode. Yeah. And like I said, it was early on in the show, and it's probably gained since then, but it was not one of the higher downloaded episodes, and I was afraid it was because it ended up being so long.
I mean, I think that that's a deterrent to newbies, but as far at this point for me, and I would say this show kind of birthed from not wanting to take podcasting so seriously anymore. Before we started recording, we both mentioned me doing this for 10 years, and for the first, I'd say 7 of those years, it was all about how can I manipulate podcasting into a way to make money and be a full-time gig. Which if you go into, I think anything really, anything that's I guess an art or a creative process thing, you're gonna, I think, fail. It should be something that's maybe in the back of your mind. But as soon as I started developing this show and stopped caring about how good it was as far as can I make money off of it, can people respect it and whatnot, is when I started seeing being just creatively fulfilled. I've never been happier podcasting than I have been with this show, and B, within a couple months of doing this show, I booked the Aaron McGathy interview. That was huge for me. I was able to book the Philadelphia Podcast Fest last year as the first time doing it for me live in I think 8 years at that point. And just being asked to do a show live at another venue and then doing a show live in New York, and just kind of a snowball effect of all these cool things that were happening. Still not making money off the show, but just cool things that make it just so fun to do and make me happy about what I'm doing. That I just don't care about if I have a 2 hour show, I'll air it as a 2 hour show now, because I may lose some people on that episode, but the people that want to listen to, as you said, tangents, that's usually what this show's about, is just tangents.
That's probably where I'm going to go with it. I kind of feel like if I break it up, you're going to lose any kind of momentum in the conversation. So, and I'm right there with you with the whole making money, because, I haven't made money from day one, and I'm standing strong on that.
Yeah,
but you know what? It's what's so funny about it is I've invested money into it. I wouldn't say a lot, but what the day-to-day costs are of doing a podcast, and frankly, it's so minimal that I think about it look, I don't golf. I don't do rock climbing. I don't do things where it's I need to travel somewhere to do it. It's I'm not spending those gobs of money on some hobby Well, I am. I'm spending my gobs of money on podcasting. So, I mean, that's where I choose to spend my money, you know, and I get happiness out of doing it. So I don't really, I don't really feel that it'd be great, you know, if somebody was like, hey, we want to advertise with your show, you know, and I've done some like in-kind stuff, of course, but usually it's just, you know, I'll scratch your back, you scratch my back kind of thing. And I'm fine with that too. And, you know, I mean, I think to some degree that adds a little bit of legitimacy to it, you know. I think there's like a you know, when someone's listening on the other side and they hear you doing a read for something, like they're like, it brings a certain amount of gravitas to it for some reason, you know. It's because I had this friend who like I did a read for, I think it was for the coffee shop next door to our agency, and I was literally like just doing a trade with them, you know, like and he hadn't tuned in a while, and he tuned in, and he was like, "Wow, I hear you have sponsors now. That's great." And I'm like, "Yeah, but it doesn't mean I'm quitting my day job, you know?"
Yeah. Well, yeah. Even if you find a way to make some money off your podcast, I don't, unless you're a big name like Adam Carolla or Kevin Smith or you know, or Mark, you know, you're not going to.
Yeah, no, that's a pipe dream. Yeah.
It's. You might be able to cover some costs. And like, that's like kind of like whenever I talk about Patreon for this show and the parent company of the show, it's all about like, if we could get to that base level of where it covers operating costs, like that's where I would be so happy to be at.
Me too.
Because whereas it's not like a lot of money, it's still enough like because our Patreon is not just for our podcast, it's for everything that we do, which is mainly podcasting. But, you know, it at least offsets those costs where I can do other cool things, or I can invest into, you know, because I want to say it's like probably close to like, I don't know, if I had to average it out, it's probably about $15 to $25 a month that we spend on hosting and domain names and whatever other miscellaneous bullcrap there that has a monthly fee attached to it. So like it's, you know, like you said, it's not super expensive. I don't go to the gym. I don't have, you know, I don't go golfing. I don't do anything really except for podcasting that costs me money. Outside of like life, like anything that's a hobby, I'm right with you. Like this is my hobby. I don't have any other hobbies really. Like I stopped buying comic books way back in the day because, you know, that was getting expensive. I was spending $30 every 2 weeks or whatever.
Sure.
So, you know, I just, whenever I have free money, it's usually put towards this. And like the next big thing that I'm actually like, I wish I had a Patreon following for to help cover these costs is redoing my actual studio. Like that's the thing that I'm working on, which my studio is my shed. So I want to, like, I'm ripping down all the pegboard that's in there. I'm hanging up sheetrock. I'm going to paint it so it looks nice. Going to get nice storage racks for the shed side of the shed, and then make a custom table for podcasting so that I have it in there. So like that's going to be like about a $500 project, I think, when it's all said and done. And which is good because over 10 years I have enough equipment to like be satisfied with what I have for now. But knowing that, like, I've talked to like Bridgeset Sound, who is one of the venues for the Philadelphia Podcast Fest this year, and I think for the last, I think almost every year, if not every year, the last 3 years they've been a venue. And they're actually, Steve, who is the owner of Bridgeset Sound, he's actually started his own podcast, and he'll be part of the Podcast Fest on, I don't have the dates in front of me, but he'll be part of the Podcast Fest as well. But I was talking to him, you know, we've talked about like the equipment that I need to upgrade and to just kind of be at the quality, not even, it's again, I say quality. At the end of the day, I think my show sounds pretty damn good for what it is. And so it's just like buying all this crap to make me feel better. No one else is going to care, you know?
No, I think there's a lot of forgiveness with podcasts in terms of sound too. I mean, I think people, I mean, we forget how early on we are in this medium. You know, like internet radio, if you want to call it that, if you want to call it podcasting, you know, just how early, you know, we're just in the infancy of it right now. And so, you know, when I first started out, I have like a Zoom H2 microphone. And I was trying to make it, I felt like it was a bit of a hard sell with graphic designers. So basically, my show is I talk to graphic designers and creatives in the Philadelphia area about their lives and their work, and I felt like it was a bit of a hard sell at the beginning. I don't know if I just made it a hard sell or if it really was, but I tried to make it as easy as possible. I was like, I'll come to your studio. You don't have to worry about it. I got this great microphone, and it is a great microphone. However, recently I was going back and I was listening to those early episodes, and I was like, oh, I want to pull these so bad. I know I won't, and I know I shouldn't, because it's part of a process, and this is showing the process, and that's a good thing, because now when you listen to the show, it sounds so much better. I have these Behringer microphones. I have a bit of a studio. It's kind of more of a concrete slab, and I know I should put up some foam, but it's in my office. It's not my space really, so I'm I'm trying not to push their boundaries as far as possible, Yeah. So I record in the basement in my agency in Old City. So, okay. It's I've reduced any kind of sound, it doesn't sound canny, it doesn't sound our voices are bouncing off the wall or anything, I've kind of honed it down to a degree now where when there is an issue with sound quality, it bugs the hell out of me. I'm just like, shit. If the HVAC turns on for some reason because I forgot to shut it off, or anything like that, it's just like, oh shit, let me go do that real quick. But I think people are, for the most part, a little bit more forgiving, So.
Totally. It's I think so too. It's nuts that going to the quality and the background noise. Once I learned, which took me literally, it was during the course of this show, so within the last year and a half, I learned how to properly reduce noise in the background, just that hissing sound that you sometimes get if you have, I guess, a bad connection or whatever, or if you just have a lot of background noise that's just in your ambient area. I learned recently how to get rid of that, probably about, if I would say probably February or March of last year, because I was doing something that it really bothered me on. So now, I hear, like you said, I hear the littlest thing, because I know how to A, avoid all that crap, and then B, even if that crap happens, I can usually get rid of it. And then every now and then something still slips through and I can't get rid of it. And I'll say one thing is that Zencastr, which is what we're using to record today, helped me a lot with that, because I don't have to worry about, okay, well, there's something going on in the background of my guest side, so I don't have to worry about it affecting my voice if I'm talking over it or something. I can easily go in there and edit out me, editing out you coughing, or editing out me saying it's over you as you're trying to say something. I can go in if I really want to edit that out, which I used to do this. I used not this show. I used to do podcasting live. I used to stream it through Stickcam, which was the YouTube of live streaming back in the day. So I'm very much of that mindset of whatever happens, just leave it in. So my editing process is probably a lot simpler than everyone else's.
Yeah, I'm still very much into opening Adobe Audition, and I'm a bit of a fascist when it comes to the ums. It's funny. It's I definitely I clean up my guests. The majority of it is me cleaning up my guests and maybe tightening up answers. If they had to take some time and think about something, because sometimes I'm throwing questions at them that they just don't really think about. And they have to take a moment and just kind of process it. But it's obviously thinking of the listener, it's you want to keep the episode snappy and the answers following the questions. But I do it just as much for myself too, just to clean myself up and make myself sound better. And I've only really maybe in the past 6 months or so, if I don't get the question out clean in the first time I try, I nail it the second time. I'll just say it twice, and in conversation it just sounds like I'm reinforcing what I just asked, but I know in my head it's no, I know where I'm going to make that cut.
It's you know what, I don't, well, there it is now. I do say it, and probably more than I should, the uhs and the ums. I don't notice it anymore, me saying it, and now that I'm trying to bring attention to it and avoid it, I know I'm saying it a lot more.
You become a master of, I feel like as a podcast host, you become a master of vocal tics. And it's like, especially on the guest side, it's like, oh, this person's a clicker. This is a person, which in fact, I'm a clicker. I realized I was interviewed for another podcast, not, maybe like 6 months ago. And I realized once we were doing the interview, I was doing every time he'd ask me a question, I'd go, I do that click right before I answer. Yeah. I was like, oh shit, I'm a clicker. And but you have the people who do the rolling ums. They'll do that's the worst when you're trying to edit, because they'll do the rolling into the answer, like well, I got into podcast, And then you have the people that just do the and the ums are fine. Ums are good. Like it's just, the thing is, it's like I've realized, like, and I did get probably too tyrannical with it. It's like, you got to keep some of the ums, because otherwise it doesn't sound like a real conversation. It sounds like people reading a script. Yeah. So you need to keep that looseness of conversation in there for sure.
And I'd say that with this show, I think that, at least on my side, I think my uhs and ums tend to be now more just natural anyway. Like I've talked enough over the last 10 years to be able to speak, and if I throw a or in there, it sounds more like part of a natural conversation. So I only ever notice it if I have a guest that says it too much, and that might be when I edit it. But other than that, my editing process is usually just listening to the show again, making sure there's no audio drift, because that seems to be usually my biggest problem, probably because out of 10 interviews, 9 of them are remote, if not all 10. So that can be an issue. Usually if I'm talking to somebody that's within the States, at least, it's rare that that's an issue. So it's literally me listening and going back to make sure that there's just no audio issues and whatnot. The one time that I ever, in the last 2 years, that I sat down to like make sure that I spoke slowly enough that I wasn't speaking faster than what I was thinking, because I have that issue all the time, is for January we did our first annual Podiversary show at Tattooed Moms with 4 other shows. So we promoted it on Ben FM. They do a podcast every Saturday morning airs on 95.7 Ben FM. It also publishes as a podcast called Ben Around Philly. So I was on that to promote the Podiversary show, so I went into that knowing, okay, Kev, you say and way too much to be on real radio, so you need to know what you're going to say and be good. And I want to say, like, if that was we'll say a 12-minute segment, about 9 minutes in, I went without saying or and when I did say it, I blinked. I know the host saw me blink, and like we both knew why it happened. But I was like so proud of myself, because listening back to it, like Saturday morning, I think is when it airs. I threw on 95.7 on my phone. I listened to it. It was just a big deal for me to be on FM radio, because it was kind of like a dream come true. Because that was the original dream, right? Like, I know before on our first take of the show, you mentioned you had a daughter who's in 4th grade. So I assume that you're probably around my age or older. I'm 30. I'll be 33 this year.
Yeah, I know. I'm a little older. I just turned 39. I'll be 40. Okay. So
okay, yeah. I have 2 kids. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old.
Very cool.
So, I have a 4-year-old who will be 5 in July. So, I'll be 33 in July. So I turned 33 on the 13th. So my birthday weekend will be celebrated at the podcast festival.
Oh, very cool.
But so you grew up at a time where there was no internet radio. Same with me.
Oh God, no. And I was, it's funny. I don't think I ever actually considered going into radio, but I did have this moment where it was the college I actually ended up going to. We went to this is so cringeworthy, but it was me and my buddies. We were high school kids, and we went to the open house for my college, Pennsylvania College of Technology, and I had no idea I was going into graphic design yet. I didn't really. I was actually there. I was there because my friend's mom went there, and it was like an open house, and she was like, "Oh, you guys should come out and check out the school. You'll be going to college in a few years." And they had the college radio station, and they were doing like essentially like an open mic for people to come in.
Awesome.
And there was a DJ who was kind of moderating it, and it was this very put upon college girl who was like, I don't know what the hell the guy in front of us was talking about. Like, I think he was in school already, and he was talking about his major. It was just very dry, and it's like a college radio station. They're like, he's talking about engineering, and it's like, and then here's Sublime, and it's like the segues were terrible. So like we went into it, and it was so funny because I think we, I know I was into Howard Stern at that age, and Private Parts was out, and so I was pretty familiar with kind of being like, I use the word irreverent loosely here, but it was like, we were like gonna go have some fun on the radio. So we were like, I remember like we were like, it had been daylight savings time, and we were talking about all the things we would have done with that lost hour. that was the topic we chose to talk about with this girl, and I want to think that like the look on her face was, it looked like she was just so happy we were there. Like she just, like, especially after the guy that was just there, just talking about like, well, there's any number of things that you can do with a degree in engineering. Like we come in and we're like, look, we could have made minute rice, 60 times, but hey, real quick, I just got a message that lost connection to server, attempting to reconnect.
We should be good.
Still good? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, we should be good.
So anyway, but yeah, so we, yes, it's reconnected now. So we, it was like, that was my one taste of it. And I always enjoyed it. And then podcasting came around, and I never really gave it too much of a thought of doing one for the longest time. And kind of going back to that whole thing of not having a friend that's into it, it's kind of like, it was like, I needed to do it with somebody. Like, I'd want to do something like this, actually. I think one of the first things I thought of was doing a show kind of like this, where it was just, two guys talking, and whatever we talk about, we talk about. And I just, kind of got like lukewarm response, like, yeah, that sounds cool, but it was like nobody knew anything about audio, and then I got to a point where I was like, well, maybe I just need to put the onus on me if I'm going to do this, and I'd been listening to podcasts for years. I started listening to Ricky Gervais when Ricky Gervais was putting out podcasts, and then I got into Mark Maron, and just from there it just snowballed. And so I was like, well, it makes sense to do one on graphic design. So maybe I could have guests, make it more like Maron's show, but more specific to design in Philadelphia. And so it was a joke to call it high res. I was saying, I would make this joke for probably a straight year before I finally bought the microphone, where I would just go, "You're listening to High Res with Ryan Starr," and like in this very NPR-ish voice, and it's so funny because when I first started out, I think I did have this very like serious tone. Like if you listen to those first episodes, it's like, "You're listening to High Res. I'm Ryan Starr. Today's guest is," and I was just like, and you wouldn't believe it, but like I remember the moment where I was like, I'm going to be casual in this intro. Like, I'm going to switch over. You're talking. I don't remember if it was in this conversation or the last one where we were talking about like nobody cares about the numbering of episodes.
Yeah.
I was like, nobody cares about how I treat the intro to the show, but it was a monumental shift for me. I was like, all right, this is going to be the episode, and I was like, hey everybody, welcome to High Res, available on iTunes. I was like, I'm doing it. This is the episode. Like this is the turning point. I was like, nobody cares. I don't even know how many listeners I had at the time. So, so I decided I was going to do this on graphic design, and it's just kind of, I think I was saying earlier about like, I was just taking this microphone into people's spaces and just plonking it between us, and we would talk for a while, and eventually it did get to a point where I was like, okay, I can bring people into my office at work. We can, I can control the area a little bit, control the environment a little bit more, and it's been great. I mean, I've absolutely loved every minute of it, and it's a lot of work, but but there's not really any part of it that I really don't like, so it's okay,
Yeah, it's for me. It's like I said. It's almost doing this is kind of fulfilling that dream, and being like going back to the original comment of the dream was like being on Ben Around Philly, doing the FM gig. Like I remember, I don't know if you remember back when YSP was I was probably I was in high school still, so I was like 16 or 17 years old, and YSP was doing like this contest where you could become a DJ on YSP.
I don't remember it specifically on YSP, but I know some of the stations around here occasionally still do that. What's the one? Was it 104.5?
104.5.
Yeah, I think it's one of the alternative stations.
Yeah. It's probably 104.5 because that's God. Why can I not think of the name of the station? It's what I listen to all this. I think is it literally just called Radio 104.5?
Radio, yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. It is Radio 104.5.
Yeah. When I do listen to music, when I'm not listening to a podcast, like when my phone dies, it's usually 104.5 that I'm listening to. But yeah, so YSP, and this was before, like, Stern was still on terrestrial radio. I don't think he bailed until I was in my maybe late teens or early 20s. Opie and Anthony may have even still been on in the morning, or maybe they were recently, or not in the morning, in the afternoon. Maybe they were recently let go because of the whole church thing.
Right.
But they were, so YSP was doing something.
Was it the church thing or the milk thing with those guys? What was the milk thing? Remember, didn't somebody get like really sick with drinking like a ton of milk? I know the church. I think you might be right about the church thing, but then didn't they lose another gig because of like they had this thing about like you can't drink like a gallon of milk or like 2 gallons of milk, and somebody actually did. I mean, I don't know if they died or if they got really, really sick or something.
I know. I don't know if this is what you mean or if this is just another thing that happened with another radio station. But there was this, like, the contest of Wee for a Wee, where you would have to drink a bunch of water and I think either not pee yourself or your hand was on a, I think it was, you just drank as much water as you could, and you weren't allowed to go to the bathroom until, like, you had to be the last man standing. And I think that's when the world discovered water poisoning. Like, you can drink too much water. And I don't know if the person died. Yeah, and it wasn't a radio station around here, so I guess it wasn't O&A. But I don't know. I don't remember the milk thing, so that I don't know if that was them. It could have been because I didn't really listen to O&A until I started driving my own car. So when I was, I guess 15 with a permit, and they were on in the afternoon on YSP, and I remember them just going away. And years later is when I discovered I think they went away because of the church incident, as they call it.
I think you're right about that. I mean, I do know about that. I remember that.
I don't remember the milk thing. It sounds like something they would do for sure, but I do not remember that. And that may have been something maybe early on or maybe after they left. I'm not sure. But YSP was looking for DJs, and me and my buddy, who again were in high school, were like, "Hey, we can do this," and we never recorded a demo and sent it in like we said we were going to. And in 2007, well, probably 2006 no, 2007 is when Smodcast started, February of 2007. And I think that was the first podcast I started listening to was Kevin's The Smodcast. And it was at that point it was like, hey, this is something like kind of like radio where I could do this. And it was in June of 2007 that my buddy was like, hey, I want to produce a podcast. Who wants to host it? And at the time, I was, and my listeners probably are rolling their eyes because I've told this story not in a while. It's been some time. So, this can kind of be like a new issue number 1 if you're in comic book terms. But I was wrestling for years, and I broke my ankle in February of 2007, actually. It's probably why I started listening to podcasts, because I had nothing to do. And and at that point I was out of it because everything kind of started shutting down with the federation that I was in. I was like, yeah, absolutely. I mean, all talking on a microphone in front of, a wrestling crowd or in, just for a radio show is kind of the same thing. And I'll do my wrestling gimmick. The first show was called Happy Hour with Steel Tip. It was going to be a show about booze. And I was going under my wrestling name and whatnot. And that's how it all started for me, and it was really just kind of fulfilling that childhood dream, because it was the same. My co-host was the same guy who in high school we said, let's send a demo in, and that's how like 10 years of me being an idiot on the microphone kind of was birthed. Was my passion for YSP.
Well, my thing this past year, it's been kind of interesting, is it's just made me think that you saying about like getting in front of people that never was really the thing that I thought I would be doing in terms of like, you know, doing the Philly Podfest and getting in front of people. And I don't really know why it came about. I was talking with this guy named Anthony Wynn, and he runs PHL Design, which is this free community of designers, you know, and creatives around the city. Mostly, it just revolves around the Slack channel that everyone participates in, but then we do like he'll do happy hours and stuff. And him and I were sitting around talking, and he had said something about. He wanted to do this show and tell where he wanted to do it on the topic of talking about a project that didn't go your way and why it didn't, and do a talk on that. And he was asking me if I'd participate, and I was like, oh, I would, but I was like, actually, man, I was like, what if I hosted it and we made it an episode of the show? And he was like, that actually would be really cool. And we ended up kind of pushing it on the back burner a little bit just because we had some things going on in our lives, and decided, oh, this would be really cool if we could pull this off before the end of the year, this being last year. So in December of 2016, ended up doing High Res Live. We did it at an agency in Old City and called Impart Creative. They hosted, and there was some learning curve for us in terms of you know, like it was so great because we decided we were going to focus on design for the greater good, and we were going to have a panel of guests and talk about design for the greater good, people who have had experience in that, and so we were like, well, we'll put all the money towards Phil Abundance, you know, so kind of put our money where our mouth is on it, you know. And so once we said that, everybody was like, yeah, I'll do this for free. I'll do this for free. You know, we got posters made. We had 4 designers make posters for the event, which actually was probably the coolest thing for me, you know, in terms of like seeing what these guys came up with. We just gave these 4 incredible designers a theme. They came up with really cool designs, and we got them printed, for free, and we got Impart Creative for free. But I wasn't asking the questions I needed to be asking, like, do you have chairs? You know, and they were like, you know, I think I had already set a price point. We had been selling tickets for like 2 weeks, and they were like, oh, by the way, we don't have any chairs. I was like, what? I was like, well, when are we going to get chairs? We got to rent chairs. So, you know, there's a bit of a learning curve there. But so we did this show, went really well. But, you know, I had some anxiety about it. I was very much like, I make this joke. If you've ever seen the movie The King of Comedy, the Scorsese movie with De Niro, you know, there's this scene where he's, you know, he kind of has these grandiose ideas of himself, and he's in his mother's basement. He lives with his mother. He's in his mother's basement, and he's got cardboard cutouts of Liza Minnelli and Jerry Lewis, and he's like sitting there like he's on a Tonight Show panel and having these imaginary conversations with them. I was very much the Rupert Pupkin of my house for that week, like just in my basement, kind of pacing the basement, just kind of like looking at my notes and doing a run through, and I'd record it and listen to it on the way into work. You know, nice. And I was just like, you know, trying to like, I had this whole like, you know, imposter syndrome thing where I was like, look, I don't stand in front of people and do podcasting. I do it in a room, so I better be on my game. And I was on my game. I was almost nervous about the fact that I wasn't nervous. Like that night, I was like, wow, I have no nerves. Like, is this right? You know, should it be this? Should it feel this easy? And it did feel easy, and it felt great. And I enjoyed doing it. And I was like, yeah, I definitely want to do that again, but I want to take a little bit of a break. And then I get this, and then it was literally the weekend after, and I'm like kind of like in that decompress mode, and I'm like, oh, okay, I don't have to think about it for a while, none of this. And I get this email from this guy named Jeff DeMasi, who runs Ignite Philly. Ignite Philly is kind of, for lack of anything else to compare it to, kind of like a TED Talk. You know, you do these 5-minute talks on a subject. You have 20 slides. The slides just go behind you. You're up on a stage, and you have to keep up with the slides. Like, so you have to be on your game with, like your points, like it's the exact opposite of podcasting. You can't go off on tangents. Like, you need to know what you're saying.
I'd be awful at that.
Well, it was funny. So he emails me and he's like, "Hey, I want to know if you'd be interested in doing it." And I was kind of like, my first instinct was, no, I don't want to do that. And then I was like, no, you have to do this because you did the live show. It's like, this is the next step. This is the next step. And so I did that. And it went wonderfully. It was a great experience. It was a lot of fun. It was, again, it was a lot of prep. It was a lot of me being the crazy guy in my basement, kind of, going through it. But I mean, I pretty much had it down pat. Like, by the time I hit the stage, like, I knew every point to hit. I was kind of, I'm actually really curious to see. They haven't posted it yet. I know they're going to post it on YouTube, like the entire night's talks. But I'm very kind of anxious to see it because I know I was very much like kind of like pacing the stage, kind of like a stand-up comedian, and I had some moments of spontaneity in it too, which was good, like a little bit of improv, and it was really interesting because I had this moment at the very end where I had gone through several iterations of what I was going to say, and I had this moment towards the end where I was just doing so well with hitting my marks that I was a little ahead. And I had this monitor where I could see what slide I was on, and I knew I had some time to kill. And I just had this line that the whole speech I did 5 minutes. I was actually on podcasting, and it was on what I called podcrastination, which it wasn't about the 2 years that I've done podcasts. It was about the year I thought about doing a podcast and did nothing about it. And the whole point was really I was telling people, like, look, you have an idea and you want to do it. And there's some reason you're not doing it, whether or not you want to give yourself permission to do it, whatever it is, but you need to do it because I'm on the other side of that now. And I'm telling you, there's so much that you didn't know about yourself that you're going to find out. So that was kind of the whole point. And I had this line where I was like, I was kind of standing there in front and I just kind of, maybe the first breath I took in the whole speech. And I was like, look, if I didn't have the skill, I had the drive, and I knew that was the most important thing. And I probably just butchered that right now, but it was something along the lines of that, and it came out cleanly. And it was so funny because that was the thing that was getting retweeted after I got off the stage. Like that one, spontaneous thing where I was like, I need to fill time here, and I cut it like 2 versions earlier, but that was the thing that kept getting retweeted. So it was really interesting. And then after that, I got asked to do the keynote speech. It's this AIGA thing, and that was insane because they were like, okay, we need you to speak for 35 minutes. I was like, 35 minutes? I was like, I don't want to hear myself talk for 35 minutes, And what was really interesting about that was they wanted me to speak to these young designers. It was graduating seniors. So I really had to go back through previous episodes of the show. I wanted to talk about the people I've had on the show and the things I've learned from them. And what was really interesting, about doing that was just going back and hearing some of the quality of those old shows and kind of like the lessons there, it's like, wow, the show has actually grown, and I should feel good about that. But too, like just kind of trying to boil down like some words of wisdom from just these conversations like you and I have on these podcasts, and something I could share out with these graduating seniors. And that is why on the live show on July 22nd at Kitchen Table Gallery, what I want to do is I'm having Steve DeCusatis and Kathy Mueller, who are both previous guests of the show. They're going to be on the panel. We're all inviting recent grads or maybe the seniors currently in school to come on, and they're just going to talk about why they got into design and kind of ask us questions. And so that's going to be the focus of the show. It's a bit of a shift. Usually we're talking with professionals who are kind of already established, but I thought maybe this would be a great opportunity, and just kind of coming off the heels of that AIGA talk, to focus on the younger designers and kind of give them a forum too. And frankly, look, if somebody were to get a job or something from being on the podcast, that's a win for me. I mean, I think that would be really cool. So that's what we're going to focus on with the show. And then I feel like our show's at 3 p.m. and it's, July afternoon. I was like, oh, that might be a tough sell. So we're doing like we're going to be doing for the first 25 tickets that are free. But for the first 25 tickets, everybody's going to get a gift bag, and we're going to be doing a giveaway of the new House Industries book, The Process is the Inspiration, that night. So definitely reasons to come out to the show. And just like recently, it's been this like public speaking has just really seemed to be the thing. It's like I keep getting thrown into these these situations, and I'm all for it. And it's like, look, I don't know if I got into it for that, but it's like I kind of want to. I just kind of seeing how this thing like where this thing takes me, and that's kind of been the most fun.
Yeah, the one thing I've learned from podcasting with this show is literally like looking at it as something like, I don't want to say I don't care about, but I guess not take so seriously like I did before, and not think about so much of the business side, and just kind of think of like, hey, I want to talk to these people. I'm going to try to get these people on, and then I'm going to go on and have a good conversation. At some point, probably 45 minutes, 50 minutes into it, I'll remember that I have to ask some questions, and just, have a good time. Has open, like I said, I think it was part of this conversation, I think, that we've had, but I'll say it again, even if it was, this show has opened up so many different doors for me that, I purely enjoy. It's given me, so the one thing that and you've kind of said it without saying it, is challenging yourself to do new things or different things is kind of what just keeps you on your own toes and keeps your show fresh, or keeps whatever you're doing fresh. It doesn't have to be a podcast. This could really apply to anything, but for me it's podcasting. So like, it was like listening to you talk about your live show that you're doing at KTG. I think it's great that you're doing something that's, completely different, because for a live show, you have to change the format of your show, because it's in front of an audience instead of just you and one other person, or you and imaginary people, that you're not seeing listen to your show. So it is way different. And that's like, for me, that was like, well, what can I do? And literally, I was talking to my buddy who ends up being my co-host on the show for the live ones, and he was like, well, idiot, you've always said that you wanted to somehow make some sort of late night talk show. Why not just do your live show as a late night talk show? And I was like, oh my God, that's genius. Like, I don't know how I didn't see that. And that led into, doing the show live a couple times in places I never thought I would end up doing it. And now, like, the new challenge for me is, and so far we're keeping that pace for this year, was to do 6 shows in a 12-month span. So from January to December 31st, I'm hoping to do 12 live shows. The Philadelphia Podcast Fest will be our 4th one for the year. So we're on pace. And I emailed something that I never even thought of, and makes no sense whatsoever. But I emailed a bunch of Renaissance fairs in the area and said, hey, crazy idea. Let's live podcast. Here's the gimmick to make it fit in the Renaissance Fair. What do you think? And we're working with one of the smaller Renaissance fairs in Wrightstown, Pennsylvania, to hopefully kind of put something together in September, I believe, to do something silly. So it will be shifting my show even more to keep me on my toes, to be part like improv and then part, live podcast.
You'll have to tell me which one. I don't know. So my mother-in-law and my father-in-law, they live in Florida. They come back to town every year, and it's right around like late August, early September. And they take my daughter to a Renaissance fair. I'm not sure which one though, but you'll have to let me know which one. Or you just did. You did say which one. I'll need to find out which one it is, because
if I had to guess, they're probably going to the big Pennsylvania Renaissance Fair, which is in I don't know where it's at. It's
like an hour away, I think.
Yeah,
but.
Yeah, well, and you know what? So are you actually in the city of Philadelphia, or are you?
No, I'm actually in Havertown. I work in Philadelphia.
Okay,
but I live out in the burbs.
Yeah, so I'm in Bucks County. I'm in Levittown.
Okay.
So same boat, But yeah, I want to say that the PA Renaissance Fair for me is probably about an hour. The Wrightstown one is only about 40 minutes away, 30 to 40 minutes away. But I feel like that's like just like something nutty that came out of having a guest at our last live show. Well, the last live show at the time of this recording, we did at Atomic City Comics on South Street, and we had this guy on, Joe Gates, who is he hosts like an improv show the first Friday of every month, and I was in a bind for another interview that ended up not happening, but I needed someone to portray Thor. And a lot of people recommended Joe. So we started talking, and I was like, hey, this idea of me booking it as Marvel's Thor, but then it ends up being that it's the real Norse god from Norse mythology Thor, that just cracks me up. So let's do that at the live show. And it went over bonkers. And afterwards we were talking as I was cleaning up, and I was like, because he's an actor at the Renaissance Fairs, I was like, oh my God, would they be interested in a podcast? and so that's something that we're working on.
Oh, that's great. That feels like it could be its own podcast.
Oh my God. Yeah. It's just, it sounds so silly and so stupid that it would never work. And I'm hoping that, like, Wrightstown Renaissance Fair is a lot smaller than like the Philadelphia Ren Fair, the New Jersey Ren Fair, and then the big Pennsylvania Ren Fair, which is like the biggest in the area for us. And I was like, and I'm not like, I used to go as a teenager. I used to love the Renaissance Fair, but I haven't gone in years. I've never gone. And you know what? And it's not from, I probably would love the shit out of it, but I've never gone. And for me, like, I don't really, like, my fantasy that I enjoy is superheroes. So, like, Lord of the Ring movies, I get why they're so popular, and I enjoyed watching them in the theater, but I will never watch those movies again. And it took me 3 years to watch the first episode of Game of Thrones. Now, I'll say I'm into Game of Thrones now, but it took me a very long time to get into that show. So for me, fantasy and mythology that's about dragons and stuff isn't my top priority. I'd rather see, someone with metal claws go snick it than a dragon breathe fire.
No, I'm with you there. I probably feel like it falls lower on the totem pole of my geekdom.
Yeah.
When it comes to, like what I'm going to devote time to. And I couldn't even get to, you say, you'd never watch The Lord of the Rings again. It's like, I think I would watch Lord of the Rings again before I'd ever watch The Hobbit. Like 9 hours of The Hobbit. That book is like 150 pages long. How is it a 9-hour movie?
I have no desire to, I've never seen any of the Hobbit movies.
I'm waiting for someone on Vimeo to just do an edit of that movie down to like a 2-hour movie.
I will watch that. I will watch
I will too.
movie. But other than that, like when I heard it was going to be a trilogy, I said I just can't devote myself to 3 more movies about what I assume is a ring. Like, I just assume that this movie is about a ring again, and I can't do it. It's we've done it once. I can't, and I'm sure I've never read the books, so my geek cred, like I said, is way not in that world of fantasy. Like, I don't even have a desire to read those books. It's just not my bag.
That's passed me by. You know what's actually passed me by? Like, I just can't muster the interest in is James Bond.
Oh, yeah.
I people go on and on about James Bond. Like, are you excited about James Bond? No, not at all. Not at all. It's just like on the heels of Roger Moore dying this week, and maybe that's why it was at the top of my mind. But it was but I was like, I've never been into James Bond. I've tried, man. I tried reading the books. And if you want to talk about a guy who hates women and loves racism, those books will be right up your alley.
Oh
but and the movies, the movies are good. I've enjoyed a few of them. I think my problem was I got introduced to the Timothy Dalton movies first before anything.
Oh, okay.
And that was it. It was Endgame there. It's like, your license to kill has been revoked.
I watched GoldenEye. That was my first exposure to Bond, and I enjoy. Like, I love GoldenEye, but I don't.
People love that movie, yeah. And you're a little younger than me, so that probably works out. Like, it's probably on HBO, like right around like the time that you were impressionable enough.
Yeah,
that's just the way it worked for me. It was like the License to Kill was on like every 5-hour block. Like, they had like one License to Kill play.
I actually want to say my dad took me to see it in the theater. GoldenEye, but like, and I love that movie, but I've seen a couple other Pierce Bronson ones. I think he did 2 more after that.
Oh, I think he did 5. I thought he did 5.
Did he? Oh, see,
yeah.
I didn't see. I maybe saw one of them. And
all right, for knowing nothing about James Bond, let's see if I can name him. He did GoldenEye, did Tomorrow Never Dies. He did. No,
they're the only 2 of the ones that I know the name of.
Oh, there was another one, Die Another Day.
Oh, yes.
Die Another Day. I know there's some other ones in there, though. I want to say he did 5.
I don't see, and I only saw, like I said, GoldenEye, and I think if the one with Halle Berry, I think, was the other one that I saw.
Was that Die Another Day? I think that might have been Die Another Day.
I think so. I only saw a little bit of that one, and I have no desire to see the Daniel Craig ones. It's just not my. Again, it's on paper, I would say it's actually very much something I'd be into, but. Same here. It's something that, like, I don't know, again, in the world of comic book movies that we live in now, like, it's just, I have no desire to spend $40 for 2 people to go to the movies to see Bond when I can spend $40 to go see Guardians of the Galaxy.
All right, well, let's talk about that, actually, because that's usually the rabbit hole we fall down on my show. Like, if anybody's got any kind of, like, interest in anything nerdy, we usually just go right into it. So I think I said to you, I don't know if it was on this part or the last part, where it was like, I had a conversation with a guy that we went from, like, talking about Moonlight into the WWF, like, in the 80s. You know? I don't even know how we segued into that. So I've seen Guardians of the Galaxy 2. I definitely feel like I am in the minority that I'm not a fan.
Oh, really?
I didn't walk away the same way I felt about the first one. I walked out, I was like, that was something different. I finally, it was like characters I wasn't necessarily super familiar with, but it was a great story. I was like, I liked the tone that the movie struck.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this one is just like more of the same, so you're gonna like it, right? And I was like, I don't want to sound too negative about it, because I was definitely laughing out loud. There was definitely parts I liked. I thought the middle was such a slog, though. It was like so much exposition on Kurt Russell's part, and I just didn't feel like it was a little too long, a little too overindulgent.
Well, I think that's a lot of these comic book movies always have the issue of being a little too long. Almost all of them, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. But it bums me out, because I feel like I might have passed through something now, like, where I'm on the other side of, like, I don't know if I need to see this one. You know what I mean? Like, where it's become. I think what's great about I love everything that's happened with, like, what Marvel's been doing with these movies, and I grew up a DC kid, and I so wish they could get their shit together. But you know, like, I love the idea of this, like, interconnected universe,
yes.
But I do feel like what the consequence now has been, like, these movies are becoming so episodic, and so, like, let's just get you to the next one, you know? And it's like, you know, like, here are the little hints of what it might be next time. And it's like, well, what's the end game here? And I kind of feel like a movie like Civil War was more of an end game, and maybe where you felt like a bunch of pieces that had been moving closer and closer together for a long time finally came together in a very satisfying way. And I feel maybe Infinity War will be that. I mean, it's the same guys making it, so, you know, I feel like those guys have, you know, a good head on their shoulders, with the Russo brothers, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, I feel like they have a good head on their shoulders, and they can kind of, you know, like, they approached Winter Soldier as, you know, like this, like, spy movie, and that was such a good movie.
Such a good movie.
You know, and but I mean, just like Doctor Strange, I remember liking it, but that's all I remember. It was like you go to a restaurant and you're like, what did you have to eat? It's like, I don't remember, but I remember I liked it. You know, but it's like, well, shouldn't you remember what you had? You know, like, shouldn't there be some detail? It's like, I guess, you know, I didn't hate it, so I must have liked it. I don't know if it's like one of those things, you know.
As the kid who saw the original X-Men movie probably 13 times in the theater, because it just was, for me, I thought, you know, for its time at the very least, I thought it was such a great movie.
Well, and you got to remember the time too. I mean, you were talking about, like, what was the last big superhero movie before that X-Men movie? Was probably Batman and Robin, which was such a shit show. So, I mean, the fact that it was a superhero movie that was taking superheroes seriously again was such a big deal. I mean, I want to say X-Men was before Spider-Man.
I always have
Spider-Man.
Yeah, I always have an issue. I have the same issue, because they were within a year of each other. I think. Yeah. I think X-Men was 99 or 2000. And
it was 2000, and then because Spider-Man was definitely post 9/11, because you remember that trailer they had at the Trade Center. Yeah.
So X-Men was 2000, and then Spider-Man was 2001.
Yeah.
But
no, it might have been 02.
Oh, maybe.
Because the movie didn't come out. The trailer was out when 9/11 happened. So it must have been the summer of 02.
Yeah, you're right. It was 02. But X-Men, and that's why like Days of Future Past was...
That was such a great movie.
Yeah, for me. And so before Civil War came out, I said Days of Future Past is my Civil War, because Civil War, the comic book from, I think it was 2006-ish, maybe? That storyline is what brought me back into reading comics again. Because I had stopped, like every teenage boy, I stopped reading them because it wasn't cool anymore. And I started reading them again because of that Civil War comic book storyline. So, and I had said in 2006, and that was like a couple years before Iron Man came out. So, and I think it was a year or two before Disney bought Marvel. So the idea of this connected universe really wasn't, no one was thinking about it at that time. And I said, how cool would it be to get like all these comic book heroes on one screen in this in a Civil War movie? That would be so cool. And when Days of Future Past came out, because X-Men meant so much to me I guess I was probably 15 when that movie came out. 15 going on 16, I think. And so Days of Future Past was just like, wow, this is like officially connecting the universes of the X-Men trilogies now. And it meant, like, that movie, I loved it. It was, I don't know, I just loved seeing both the cast on one screen. And then Civil War was, without comparing it to the comic book too much, like, it was a very satisfying movie. It was so good. And had, I think, one of the best villains, like, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because it was a villain who actually had a reason to be bad. And
a villain who essentially wins.
Yeah.
Which was different as well. You know? They have that great scene at the end where they're like, well, you got beat, and he's like, did I?
Yeah, exactly. And it is, it's probably not my favorite Marvel film. I have a hard time tossing my number one out there, but I think it always kind of boils down to Winter Soldier is still, because it is, like you said, it's a spy movie just with comic book, and it's literally, if you put James Bond in that role instead of Captain America, it's the same film almost.
Right.
It's just and okay, there you go. Going back to Bonds, like, on paper, Bond should work for me, and it does when you has Captain America in it. Like, that movie was, I think, just it doesn't feel like a comic book movie. It doesn't play like a comic book movie. I think that's what's so special about Winter Soldier. And the kid who saw X-Men, I don't know, like I said, 13 times. I still haven't seen Ant-Man. Which, and Doctor Strange I've only seen the first couple minutes of, like maybe the first half hour. So someone who considers himself at least a big comic book movie fan at the very least, with Marvel, I do skip a few because there's just so much of it, going back to the point of like picking and choosing. And for DC, I tend to, skip out on it.
I'm really bummed about DC.
So let me ask you this, because I just saw Batman vs Superman about a week ago.
Okay, well, then before we continue, which version did you see? Did you see the director's cut or the or just the theatrical?
Probably the theater cut, but the theatrical.
Okay, but then you saw the truly. So it's so funny because it's one of those things like it tastes like shit. What's the answer? Have some more of it, And it's like, but the director's cut is actually a little bit. It's a little bit more of a complete film. It's not good, but it makes a hell of a lot more sense than the theatrical cut, because the theatrical cut is. I fucking halfway through, I was like, what the fuck's going on? Like,
So did you see that in theater?
Yes, I did. I did see it in theater, and I walked out. Well, I didn't walk out of the movie, but I walked out, and I was like, "Oh, that was garbage." You know, like usually a movie needs to like kind of sit with me for a little bit, and I'm kind of like, okay, like I didn't like that, but I like that. You know, it's like I knew instantly. I was like, that was terrible. You know, like
that movie. Should have been a movie I went to the theater to see. I should have been standing in line to see at midnight because it was been
so angry.
because it's Batman, who is, you know, one of my favorite superheroes. I'm a Marvel
favorite. Batman's my favorite for sure. In fact, it's funny. It came up earlier. We were talking about Kevin Smith and Fat Man and Batman. I was literally today, like, you know, the sunnier part of today was sitting out on the deck reading New 52 Batman, like, just like the Court of Owls and the City of Owls. So freaking good. And I was like, and here's the thing, and I mean, to circle back on Marvel, like, because I have one of those Marvel Unlimited, subscriptions, like where you can read it online. Okay. And so I was in a Marvel kid, and which is great. In the past, like maybe 2-3 years, I've really gone back and I've read everything now. Like I've read all that stuff, and because you can access it all now, and so I'm really kind of up to speed on a lot of stuff, and like I said, I was a DC kid growing up, but DC doesn't really have something like Marvel Unlimited. So it's like, I'll go to the library with my kids, and sometimes I'll grab one of like the collections, you know?
Yeah.
And I was just sitting there, I was reading this book, and I was like, DC is not coming up with original material like this. Now I know Court of Owls is a pretty old book at this point, like it came out a few years ago. But DC's getting, you know, slammed right now for, it's like you just keep rehashing Civil War 2, and you know they're bringing back the clone conspiracy, you know, in the Spider-Man line, and it's like they wait like 10 years and then they just like rehash an old storyline. And I don't know if you've read Civil War 2 at all, but it's basically Minority Report. I mean, like, you know what I mean? It's like there's this Inhuman who can see the future, but like, should we trust that he can see the future? He's not infinite, blah 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 blah. And it's like a lot of, and I love Bendis. I think he's a fantastic writer. Like like if he's writing it, like I'm in. And he's writing Civil War 2, but I'm just kind of like, I don't know. And they're getting slammed for the whole diversity thing. I don't know how much you've heard about that or followed that, but I think the point that they're missing is like they're taking all these characters that were like established, you know, characters defined a certain way, and then they're just it feels a little bit like lip service. I feel, you know, it's like, we're gonna make Iron Man a woman now, we're gonna make Thor a woman, and we're gonna make, you know, Sam Wilson is gonna be Captain America now, and that's all great, and I think having more diversity in comics is fantastic. I just wish that they could come up with more original ways to do it. I mean, if you look back in the 70s, I mean, that's where Black Panther and Luke Cage were born out of. You know, it wasn't like somebody going, we need to make Superman black, which I mean, they did do anyway, but you know what I'm saying? It wasn't like let's create these characters. And I know you could go back and say like, oh, well, Luke Cage's origins were much more blaxploitation, you know, but look at what he's evolved into as a character now, you know, like, I mean, I think he's a fantastic character now and is newly defined. And I say newly defined, I mean, I think, you know, maybe going back to the early 2000s was when, I think it might have even been Bendis who got a hold of him and kind of redefined him in, like, the Avengers. And, you know, like, and I mean, Black Panther is certainly seen, like, you know, I think people are becoming more familiar with that character, and, you know, the movie's certainly going to help with that when that comes out. Is that going to be next year? I forget when that comes out. I don't know if that comes out pre-Infinity War.
I think it is pre-Infinity War, but I think it's...
know, like, I think that stuff is so important, and I just wish I know what it is. I know they're probably sitting there going like, do you know how many years we're gonna have to put into this character before like people finally start buying the book? And it's like they have so many lines right now, and it's like that's part of the problem. It's like I feel like, you know, while they're killing DC in the movie theater, I think on the comic book stands, DC is killing Marvel. But I think it's like because they have so many titles now, and people don't know what crosses over to what. And
well, yeah, and that's one of the reasons I fell out of comic books is that, again, for the second time, like I'll still I'm probably going to go, because I was reading pretty much exclusively the New 52 Batman stuff, and I stopped off, I think, right before 0 Year. So like I found a comic book shop that I like that's near my work that I'm probably gonna go and start like dropping a couple dollars every couple weeks to get just the trade paperbacks to catch up on Batman. But that's like my issue with comic books is that there is so many titles, and I get it, like it's how they're making money, but that it is. You know, I think the process is simple. If you want to introduce a new diverse character, introduce them in an established book and keep them in that universe until that character catches some fire, and then you spin it off into its own line.
Yeah, I think you have a point there.
I mean,
I think that would definitely be a way to do it.
I think that makes the most sense, because you're absolutely right. It's going to be hard to sell, you know, a new character on a comic book. You know, it's maybe not. Maybe if you make that story interesting enough, then it should sell. I mean, I guess it falls on the writer to make the story, you know, worth buying, despite whether it's a new character or an established character. Because if the story's good, people are going to buy it. People are going to talk about it, and people are going to buy it.
No, that's absolutely true, and I think that maybe it just comes down to, you know, to what you just said, like you find a storyline you like and you stick with it, and you forget that, like, oh, you could catch like a brief snippet of this story in another book somewhere else, but just stick with that story, you know, like the one right now that I think is really, really interesting. I think it just wrapped up. I don't think it's continuing, but they did a Vision line, and the storyline they came up with that was incredible. It was like where Vision had created a family for himself.
Oh, wow.
It was like living in the suburbs with it was the Visions, like it was like on the mailbox, and things get dark really fast, and it was a really good storyline, and it was I don't know who wrote it, I don't know who illustrated it, but definitely look that one up, because that was an incredible story, and you know, like, I don't know if that had any kind of repercussions in other books. I doubt it, because it was just such a different story. But it was really cool, and those are fun to get into. You know, like I feel like you know, we were kind of talking about like Winter Soldier being like a spy movie. I think the way they approach some of these books too is like if you look at like the Carnage line as like a horror comic, like, it's a great horror comic, you know, I like when they do stuff like that, and this Vision, I don't even know how you describe this Vision comic, but it's definitely was not in the same vein of like, you know, your Iron Man, your Spider-Mans, you know, your X-Men, just like kind of like, you know, doing yeoman's work and just carrying the torch to the next issue. You know, it was like there was a story to be told there, and they told it fairly succinctly, you know.
But going back, I just want to go back to Batman vs Superman real quick, because
sure. I'll talk trash on that movie.
Well, so here's the ironic thing: that movie, like, I didn't see it in theater because I thought the trailer like made it look awful to me. Like, I was like, this movie it looks bad. Like, I don't want to see this movie. It's not doing its job selling me. So like, I was sick on Monday last week, so I stayed home from work, and I was like, all right, well, I'll watch, you know what, I'm gonna watch some HBO, and The Killing Joke was on there. I was like, all right, I'll watch The Killing Joke. Love Mark.
What'd you think of that?
I enjoyed it. You know, I've read I haven't read the comic in a while, but I remember reading the comic and obviously loving it. And I think what I love about the Killing Joke movie is that it gave Batgirl like more of a story, and it made it. I feel like that the Killing Joke, and maybe rightfully so, when you're reading it, is a story about the Joker and Batman. But something extremely horrible happens to Barbara Gordon, and I feel like she should be like, the story should be a little bit more about her, to a degree, and the movie does that, and I enjoyed it. You know, I thought it was, and maybe it's just because I love the Batman animated universe so much, but well,
that's where DC's getting it right. Actually.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I haven't seen. I guess they actually have an official cinematic animated universe. I don't think I've seen anything of yet. Like, I haven't watched it yet. But yeah, I mean, they've always kind of crushed the animation stuff.
Flashpoint is really good.
I do. That's one that I want to watch like so bad. And I haven't yet. And really, no reason why. No good reason. But so I watched The Killing Joke, and I enjoyed that. And I was like, all right, you know what? I got time to kill. And if worst case scenario, I fall asleep, and I need sleep anyway because I feel like crap. So I put on Batman versus Superman, expecting the worst. And I actually finished the movie and was like, I mean, it was bad, but like,
well, you went into it with lowered expectations.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, I didn't actually hate this movie. Like, I think it was better than Man of Steel, and I hate Man of Steel. Like, I hate it.
Oh, no, see, I didn't hate Man of Steel. Man of Steel for me, I mean, I thought it was too dark. Mean, dark, like saturation wise. Like, it was like, let's brighten up this movie a little bit. Well, and it was dark in that regard too.
Both regards, it was dark.
Well, I've always been a fan of, and I was just talking with somebody about this not too long ago, but I feel like it was Mark Waid who wrote it, but the Superman Birthright comic. Mm-hmm. If you've never read that, it's a great reinterpretation of Superman. The movie picks up little elements of it, but it's more of like a reimagining of a post 9/11 world. How would we react to the Man of Steel? Appearing, and it's like, and if you look at it through that scope, it's like I kind of get where they were going with that. I mean, look, it's not great, like what they're doing with this universe. I mean, I thought, you want to talk about like lowered expectations. I did the same exact thing with Suicide Squad. And I still was like, no, this is terrible. This is bad.
I got a 4K version of that for Christmas because I ended up my Xbox One broke, so my parents got me a 1S. So someone, my aunt's boyfriend knew I was getting that, so he got me Suicide Squad in 4K, and I was like, all right, this seemed like it had hope, so I'm gonna watch this movie. I'm gonna enjoy it. It's got Harley Quinn. It's got Will Smith. Like, I am so sold on this movie, and I probably within 20 minutes fell asleep.
Yeah, I didn't make it to the end, actually. I did fall asleep as well, and I have no desire to go back and finish it.
I will at some point put it back on, but like there's just so much more to see. I'm actually excited for Batman. Like, I thought Batman, I loved Ben Affleck as Batman. I thought he was good in the flick.
I didn't have too much of a problem with him. No. I just didn't think the writing was very good. No, I mean, you realize you just saw it, so like just let it sink in. Do you realize you see Batman for like a split second in that scene where the cops are like shooting at him, which I actually thought they handled really well. I mean, like that where the light comes on him and they like, kind of, I don't know what the hell he does, like just holding on to the ceiling to get out of the room.
Yeah.
Like, which I thought, like, it was like, that's how you imagine it, like when you're reading the comics, like, like of like Batman, like being like, part of the shadows kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, I like that. I like that a lot. You realize you never see him again in the suit until the whole Doomsday.
Oh my God! Yeah,
he doesn't reappear again until a dream sequence that is within a dream sequence. What the fuck?
Oh yeah!
Like, why did you have to make the second part of another dream? Like, because clearly, like the whole Barry Allen coming back is part of something. Like, why was he dreaming?
Well, and like I have a whole issue with them not integrating their television universe with their movie universe, because I love those CW shows. Especially The Flash. Like, I cannot get enough of The Flash. It makes me sad that I have to wait until September again to watch that show.
Well, here's what I need you to do for me then. I need you to go through and tell me which episodes I need to watch like a full story of The Flash, because I think I've been spoiled by like these like 10 episode seasons, Stranger Things is a perfect capsule of like 8 episodes.
Yeah.
It's like, it's the story, and you don't get that episode where you halfway through you're like, oh, this is a filler episode. They need to fill an order of 24
but here's the thing
for the season,
With The Flash, it's actually hard to do because even their bad episodes are really good. Like, I
liked the show, but I got out of it fairly early just because I kind of was like, I got back backlogged on the DVR, and it'd be like, and maybe it was symptomatic of it also being a new show, but and they're trying to get you into all the different characters, but it just kind of felt like it was like, all right, this one gave me, it was like dribs and drabs of an overall story, but it was like, I want that more succinct story, It's like, I remember sitting in a car, driving, Jesus Christ, what movie were we going to see? It was me and my buddy were going to see, something nerdy in the movie theater, like back about like 10 years ago. And I remember, whatever it was the we were talking about the show Heroes, and that first season of Heroes. If I don't know if you remember, that first season of Heroes was so good.
So good.
And everybody was so into it. And I was like, they should never have come back. They should have just been like, that's it. That's the show. Yeah. Thanks, guys. And then maybe like 5 years later, which they did kind of do and nobody watched. But like, go, guess what? We have another idea now, and we're going to do like a sequel TV show. I was like, wouldn't it be cool if TV shows kind of operated like that? Like, you don't have to, you could wait for like, in the case of like Twin Peaks, like almost 30 years for it to come back, But it's like, oh, we have a story to tell now, so we'll come back. It's like, I kind of like that idea, and I also like it was funny because this was also part of our conversation, and this did just kind of come to pass, was like, can we start just having, instead of these 24 episode seasons, let's start just having like 12 episodes, 10 episodes, like tell a shorter story, but a better story. Like
that I do agree with. Like I would, with all those CW shows, I could go with, probably about at least 5 episodes less than what they're giving us. Like, I think The Walking Dead does it right with 16 episodes. Even that's a little, they could probably cut 2 episodes out every season, and still have the same story.
Now, have you watched this last season? Because we cut the cord last summer, and so I'm a season behind. I'm waiting for the new one to come out.
I did see the.
I've heard mixed reviews at best.
I would say overall. And again, I see when it comes to, I've adopted a big Kevin Smith mentality of I just try to love everything. So I'm probably the wrong person to talk to about things because I'll probably find the good in everything, except for Suicide Squad. And like I said, Batman vs Superman had Batman in it, so like I enjoyed it. But The Walking Dead season 7, I think it was overall, I thought it was good. I enjoyed it. I thought the season premiere was great. I thought the season finale was pretty good. There was one episode in the first 8 that made it was. I guess it was important for an episode that happened later in the back half of the season, but really a whole hour dedicated to it was not needed. And you could just look at the episode to episode like ratings, and you can see the one that dips way down, and that's the one I'm talking about because it is no one liked it. It was just it was awful, and they usually have, I think, one episode a year that tends to be like that, and usually it means nothing to the story, or it could be something that you summed up in a scene or two. So I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good season overall. For me, I don't know, The Walking Dead, that's right around when I started reading Civil War is when I started reading The Walking Dead as well. So like The Walking Dead is actually is something I really love and enjoy too. And I try not to, the only thing I ever hated of The Walking Dead was the season 2 farm, season.
Well, it's so funny you bring that up because that was actually kind of what I was thinking about when you were saying about like the different episodes, just in the sense of how so I'm going to be when that finally hits on Netflix and I can catch up on it, I'm going to be consuming that in a totally different way than you did.
Absolutely.
And it's so different, like how the way we consume media now and the whole binge culture and what I think you can maybe get away with in storytelling, like over a certain amount of time. So for instance, talking about that particular season, for some reason, when that season started, I just slept on it for a couple weeks, and I had maybe 4 in our queue to the point where in the DVR where I was like, I got to start watching these or they'll start deleting. Yeah. Right. So I had to start watching it. So I binged like those first 4 episodes. And I don't know if you remember those episodes, but they were on the highway for a long time. Like, you remember they got stuck on the highway and like they didn't find the farm until like maybe it was 4 episodes in. Maybe I'm misremembering that.
I don't remember it.
But I remember people just complaining about the first half of that season, how boring it was. I didn't find it that boring. I watched it in one shot, and I was like, okay, well, that was the story. You know what I mean? So it was like my experience with that was totally different.
So that is something that, and I think this proves my theory right on that. See, that was season 2, and I used to do a podcast called Academic Nerds with my buddy Garrett Smith, who now does a podcast called I Like to Movie. And he watched season 2 of The Walking Dead on Netflix. He binged it, and we talked about at least the first half, and I hated it. I hated the first half of season 2 because I watched it week to week to week to week, and it seems so slow, and so I honestly forget what I hate about it because it's been so long, and I think they've been a better show since then. I've now talked to him. I talked to one other guy that lives in Australia, who both binge watched that season, and they thought it was good. The dude in Australia, it's one of his favorite storylines, that farm scene or farm season, and it sounds like that you didn't have as much issues with it as everyone else did because you were able to binge watch a bulk of it at least.
Oh, no, for sure. And I would say the second half of that season is maybe one of the best parts of that show. Like the whole Shane transformation.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, that got really good when they came back from the winter break on that. You know, when they picked up on that storyline, that was just phenomenal.
Yeah. And, but yeah, I mean, The Walking Dead. Now I haven't binge watched that show ever. For the most part, at most maybe 2 weeks at a time, because we'll fall behind now that we have both kids, and that's a show that we don't turn on when they're awake because, you know, they're 5 years old. Last thing I need is him looking at a bunch of zombies. But I've never binge watched it, but from what I understand that there's parts of this show are just better when you binge it, and I think that farm season is one of them because I need to go back and rewatch it because I feel like maybe I'll appreciate it a little bit more, but it was, I don't know, just so much time on the farm for no reason. Like, I don't know.
Well, just to put a button on the whole Batman versus Superman topic, I listened to this podcast called Star Wars Minute, which is this fantastic show. I absolutely adore it. It's ending soon. Like for the season, you know, they take a bit of a hiatus when they finish a movie, but they basically go through every Star Wars movie 1 minute at a time.
Yeah.
And and I know that might sound tedious, but it's pretty hilarious. They're just finishing up Attack of the Clones, which was a bit of a slog. It's definitely the worst Star Wars movie in existence, it got exacerbated by the fact that they were going through it minute by minute. Like, I was like, God, that is really terrible. You know, like sometimes you like analyze this stuff and like you listen to this podcast and you're like, oh wow, I didn't appreciate it from this, you know, certain point of view, to use Star Wars vernacular. Yeah. But like that movie's just so terrible in more ways than I even realized. But they said something really interesting, and I think to kind of put it in perspective of the whole Batman versus Superman thing, it's like they're like, no, any Star Wars movie is better than no Star Wars movies. You know, essentially, like, I'm glad it exists because I'll still watch it.
Yeah,
because it is Star Wars, and I kind of feel the same way with Batman versus Superman. It's like I'm still kind of glad they're making it. You know what I mean? Like, it sucked, but I'll probably watch it again, and I'll probably hate, you know, like I'll find some other thing to hate about it, but I will watch it again. I know that for certainty.
Yeah, it's definitely like I can picture myself watching, like, I don't know if I'll seek it out, but if it was something that I was flipping through and it ended up being playing on cable or something, I'd probably keep it on and watch it. Or, you know, even, you know, it might be something my kid enjoys because, you know, when they're young enough, they're stupid enough to like the prequel trilogy of Star Wars. So,
yeah, that's one of the crazy things because these guys that do the show are very much just even a little older than us, and they're very much about the old trilogy, and they weren't even going to do the new trilogy. They were kind of wondering if they should even open that Pandora's box. And I loved what they did with Phantom Menace, which was really great. You know, like kind of the way they approached it, because they went into it good. They were like, we're going to be super positive, you know, and sometimes they broke, and they definitely broke on Attack of the Clones. But now they feel like they've gotten over a hump, because I think everybody agrees that Revenge of the Sith is the better of the three. You know, and like, okay,
absolutely.
now we have Revenge of the Sith to look forward to. So it's like, you know, but yeah, it was I mean, oh man, it was such a slog. But they have encountered like a lot of the people that love. There's a lot of people out there that love the new trilogy. You know, that's because they were kids.
Yep.
You know, it's all about what was big when you were a kid.
And
you know, and
like my kid might be a little young to consider this new trilogy that they're doing. He might be a little young for that to be his trilogy, but there's a generation of kids that are probably about 10 years old right now that they're watching Star Wars for the very first time with Episode 7, or maybe they've watched the other ones as kind of a backlog that their parents made them watch, but like their trilogy is going to be 7, 8, and 9, and that's right. They're going to hold that near and dear to the heart. And you know, I think at least as people who consider their trilogy to be the original, we're gonna appreciate that more, because I think the original trilogy people are going to enjoy the next set of movies a lot more than the prequel trilogies.
Sure, and that's actually why I have a theory about what they do beyond this is probably going to start to harken back to the prequels. Like after they finish these movies, because they've made these movies for us, you know, ostensibly, you know, they're kind of like evoking more of these, like, you know, the tactile in terms of like special effects and stuff like that, and blending that with the digital. I wouldn't be surprised if you see like a return to like those like kind of soft edges and pastels that seem to really like harken back to the prequels. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if like in like, maybe I'm not talking like next year, I'm not talking like maybe even 5 years, but maybe in 10 years. Yeah. Like, I mean, who knows? Maybe all they need to do is one really awesome Obi-Wan Kenobi movie, and that's it. You know, maybe like that's the gateway and back into that, you know, because I actually think, I mean, if you look at what the Clone Wars cartoon has done and what Rebels is doing right now, I mean, there's certainly stuff to mine from that time period. Oh yeah. You know, it just wasn't done very well.
But see, I would like, I wouldn't, I would be lying if I said I wasn't worried about a young Han Solo movie, but like, I get it. Like, it could be really good, and it should be really good. I think Rogue One proved that they can tell other stories besides the Star Wars saga stories. But I would say, like, if they said that the next movie was going to be Obi-Wan Kenobi versus Han Solo, I honestly think I'd be more stoked to see that, because that's a character who, like, I don't like Han Solo kind of has like a bit of mystery about him that makes him who he is. So I don't know if like seeing an early story about him is something I actually want.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much I want to go through the hoops of like, oh no, they're going to do the Kessel Run. Yeah, you know, like these kind of fan service moments. It's like, that's how he got his vest. You know, I don't know. Like, I mean, who knows? I'm not writing it off by any means. Like, I actually think they could tell a really interesting story. And but yeah, the Obi-Wan thing, I think I want Ewan McGregor to have a good one. Yeah, you know, he was so good in those movies. Like, he was the high point of all three of those prequel movies. It's like, I want to see him get a good one, you know? Like, I don't know. I don't know what story you tell. I mean, he's pretty much stuck in the desert. I don't know if you take him out of that. I think you'd almost have to, but I don't know how you retcon that story, but you know, it could be interesting. And you know what? I wouldn't be surprised. Here was my theory I was kicking around, because they haven't announced what a new what are they calling them? They're not the anthologies. They're the Star Wars story. The Star Wars story. Yeah. What the one is going to be after Han Solo, and I think it's going to be Obi-Wan, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're not announcing it, because it might be a tell about Rey.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot. I don't know who it was. Maybe it was Kathleen Kennedy. Maybe it was somebody else. But there was a lot of controversy about why aren't they announcing the next. It was either why they aren't announcing what the next Star Wars story is about, or why haven't they committed to doing an Obi-Wan yet? And it's because like everyone feels that it's linked to Rey, which. I mean, makes sense. Totally makes sense.
So I didn't make that up. People are talking about
that. No, that totally is something that's out there in the ether. And it is, I mean, I hope that Rey is not a Skywalker. Like, it makes sense.
I hope she's not either. I agree with you.
Yeah, like, if she is, it's just like, I mean, I get it. It makes sense, but I don't know. That's just me predicting the story, and I don't want that. Like, I want you to surprise me and make it. And I think you could, like, that could be Obi-Wan's kid. I don't know how. I mean,
I guess maybe grandkid.
Yeah.
I don't know if it could be kid.
Yeah, I guess it would
math-wise.
I mean, there would be a lot of retconning to do, but it would, have to be grandkid or something like that. But.
Yeah. You've heard it here first, though. If the Han Solo movie is not called Scoundrels, a Star Wars story, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. It's got to be called Scoundrels, right? Because then I got to call it Han, or like if they call it Solo, a Star Wars story, that's lame. They got to come up with some different name.
I like Scoundrels.
It's got to be called Scoundrels, right?
I like that one. I would. That's. I mean, it's better than Han Solo, a Star Wars movie, or something like that. Which, if I had to guess, is probably what it's going to be called. Is Han Solo?
Maybe. I don't know. Lowest common denominator. Who knows?
It's but okay. So before we go, we got to nothing really. But you kind of, without me having to ask the questions, you answered a lot of the things that I would normally ask anyway. So I feel like we've heard your origin story here. But to kind of give it an official, I guess, an official little bow. Obviously your podcast High Res is, you
can find High Res at highrespod.com. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at highrespod. Get your tickets to our live show. It's going to be at Kitchen Table Gallery on July 22nd at 3 p.m. You can get the tickets at you can get your tickets at highrespodlive.eventbrite.com. Like I said, you get the first 25 tickets, get a gift bag at the door, and we're giving away The Process is the Inspiration, the new book from House Industries. I had a chance to talk with those guys a couple of weeks ago. It was an awesome conversation. They're personal heroes of mine in the graphic design world, and it was really awesome to sit down and chat with them at their studio in York Lynn. And and I'm really excited for their new book to come out. I got a chance to look through it. It's awesome. If you're a fan of them, you're going to love the book. And we'll be giving a copy of it away there. And Steve DeCasatis and Kathy Mueller will be joining me on stage. So if you're a fan of graphic design, if you're a fan of just three people getting together, talking on stage, and having a good time, get some swag at the door, come on out. I'd love to have you there.
I'm very excited. So this is your first year for the Philadelphia Podcast Fest, right?
Yeah, first year. I only discovered it as it was happening last year. I'm really excited to be involved this year.
That's what I heard. I had a meeting with Nathan and Tegan earlier this year, and that's what they were telling me. That a lot of people found out about it last year, and it kind of like turned into this like thing where like, what are we going to do with all these shows that want to be part of the Podcast Fest? And
it's kind of amazing how many shows, local Philly shows there are. It's really great.
And you know what? What's nuts about that as well is that I actually stole this from the show Doom Thugs. Doom Thugs calls themselves the #1 podcast in Delco, and I'm out in Bucks County, so I've called myself the #1 podcast in Bucks County. I felt like because I gave them an opportunity to perform their show live at Atomic City Comics that I could steal that and everything would be okay. But doing so, setting up these interviews, I've found out that there's like at least 2 or 3 other podcasters that are literally within 15 minutes of me here in Bucks County. I'm still going to take claim as the number one podcast in Bucks County because, like, why not? Like, they're not going to argue that. And if they do, then, like, I mean, it's just my audience versus their audience. So,
right.
Who cares?
And you know what? A good podcast war couldn't hurt, you know?
Oh my God. I'm a fan of those old school radio wars, though.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
like, I would love to I actually have this dream of, I only have talked to this person once, and I want to get him on my show, but his name, what the fuck is, his name is Noah, I want to butcher his last name, but Noah Houlihan, maybe? He's a stand-up comedian in Philly. He's part of the Plus Two comedy people. And they do a podcast, and they do a lot of conventions, like a lot of Comic-Cons they go to and do their stand-up act or their podcast there live. And I believe that Noah, like, I know he's into wrestling, and I think, like, he hooks up with some of these, like, very indie wrestling things, and I don't know if he actually wrestles with them or not, but, like, I've seen pictures of him in wrestling gear, and I'm like, my God, if I could somehow... Like, I want to get him on the show, and then I want to set up this podcast war between us that ends in the ring so that I can finally have an excuse to, like, go and wrestle again. Because it's been, like, I think 2009 was my last match. So, like, I would love to just throw on the wrestling gear again and go for it. But, yeah, podcast wars, I would love to have, like, a nice, like, just little fun, tongue-in-cheek podcast war.
Sure. A friendly rivalry. For sure.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but it's amazing how many people are out there doing it. It's, it's one of those, like, high tide rises all ships kind of deals.
Yeah.
You know, like,
well, and that's, like, again, going, like, back to Kevin Smith again on this show is I agree with him that everyone should do one because there's no bad ideas really. Like, it's every good podcast, and trust me, like, if you're not good at it, you're not gonna last. Like, you're gonna give up. More than likely, you're gonna give up on yourself at some point because it's and I think earlier in our conversation, you said something about the doubt or whatever, and like half the battle, more than half the battle, is starting your podcast, and then from there, like. Not like 50% of people that start a podcast, they usually don't get past episode 10. And then like 50% of those people, they don't get to episode 50. So like it's a ton of people start, and there's a ton of podcasts out there, but chances are a lot of them aren't active. It's just you need to get out there and do it. And I think if you get out there and do it and you're good at it, it elevates everyone to do better.
Yeah, no, and absolutely. And one of the things that I've always tried to do, like, we put the show out every 2 weeks, and that's really just what I can handle schedule wise. But I'd love to do, a weekly show, but I just don't think I could really turn it around or give it the quality that it needs. But the one of the things about that schedule is I've held to that schedule. Like in every 2 weeks, you are going to find an episode of High Res, and without fail, knock on wood, that's been the case since I finally locked onto that schedule. I mean, there was a couple start and stops when I first got going where it was like I think my first schedule where I was like, we're going to come out the 1st and 15th of every month, and then I was like, that doesn't work because the 15th might be a Sunday and no one's paying attention, if you're trying to promote it. So, and then I was like, okay, that doesn't work, so I'll go to the every 2 weeks. I've stuck to any schedule I've had. I've stuck to that schedule, and I think I started on the every 2 weeks fairly early on, where I realized like the whole 1st and 15th thing was just not working, and there's always been an episode there. And look, if I need to sit here and read the newspaper just to put out an episode, if for some reason I didn't have an interview, I would do it, because I want people to be able to find the show. When they're expecting it, because it kind of goes back to what we were talking about of like, the shows that you listen to, and those, you count on those shows, you count on them being there. So, I'd be honored if somebody is into my show so much that they're, checking their feed, every other Tuesday looking for it, and waiting for it to come out. Like that's such a thrill to think that is the case. And I don't want to let that, listener down, so.
Meanwhile, this show does nothing but let their listeners down because as we speak, I'm an episode behind in posting. So it's see, for me, it's one of those things where like, if I like, because I am weekly, the littlest thing that derails you. Like I was sick for a day and a half. So like I lost all that time. Finally got the episode edited the day that I was supposed to post it. And then like the day job blew up. So I I'm going to post it tomorrow morning finally. But it's one of those things where, again, I kind of go back to, for me, the mentality of me doing it for me now more than anyone else kind of helps me like, okay, I didn't get it out on time. It's all right. I'll still put it out. And I'm still like, that means I'm releasing 2 episodes this week. You know, I'll have episode 69 and 70 up within a couple of days of each other. Again, I think for me, the audience, you know, the audience that I want to have is going to be the audience that gets it. And they like, oh, okay, he's a week late, or he skipped a week or whatever. Like, whatever, we'll still listen. That's the that's the audience I care about. The one that gets like, they just get it. They get the fact that, hey, you're gonna get an episode, whether it's on time or not. It comes out Wednesday-ish. We all know that.
And I think I'm sure you feel this way too. It's like, I've certainly found this with my show. It's like, if you don't like me, you are not gonna like my show. You know what I mean? So it's like. So I feel like the people who have bought in, you know, like it's like, because I mean, it's my conversations with guests go very much like this conversation went, where it's like, we're both sharing, you know, you know, it's not just this one-sided interview. Like, of course I am the person conducting the interview. So, you know, the guest is, you know, has more of the onus is more on them to like bring it, you know, in a sense, like, But like if they go, like we were talking about tangents, and then it's like if they start talking about something, if they start talking about Batman versus Superman, I'm going to tell them what I thought of it and like go into my in-depth, you know, rant on why I thought it sucked, you know. It's like, and frankly, I'm sure I probably have done that like several times already over the course of the show. It's probably one of those things where they go, oh shit, he's talking about Batman versus Superman again.
I think every podcaster has that story. Like for me, it's several stories. It's my love for Kevin Smith. It's how I got into podcasting. It's how I used to wrestle. Like I try to like avoid my origin stories now because I subjected year one audience to that a lot. So
I have a couple of things right now. I've just started to be like, and especially after I was doing the research for that keynote address that I was telling you about, I realized I was like, oh, I talk about this way too much. And I like flagged and it was so funny because I flagged myself. I was like, okay, you got to stop bringing that up. Even if the opportunity comes up, just move past it because people have heard that. You know, like if you're thinking of your show as this continuous, like, you know, you listen every week, it's like people have gotten it, right? Yeah. And I had this one thing in my head. I was like, okay, don't bring it up. And then I had the next guest I recorded with, she was like, I think I've heard you talk about this once before. And she brought it up, and I was like, well, I gotta talk about it now. Like, I can't not talk about it. You're bringing it up.
I've had guests bring up wrestling before, and they're like, yeah, like, you used to wrestle, right? I'm like, oh, boy.
Yeah, how can you let that go?
And it's like, you mentioned WWF a few times. I'm like, I'm going to let it go. I'm going to let this one go. Like, we don't need to go down an hour rabbit hole about wrestling. Like, that could be another conversation for another day.
Well, we should definitely have another conversation another day, because this was awesome.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, anytime. I love having guests on. Obviously, I'm a big talker, and I mean, definitely. I think post Podcast Fest World will be a time when I can rest my lungs from talking, because there's going to be at least 30 Philadelphia Podcaster Festival goers on between now and I think July 19th is when I'm cutting it off. So that everyone gets their proper promotion in for their live shows.
Oh, that's awesome.
So, yeah, I can't wait. Ryan, thank you for being on the show.
Absolutely.
It was a pleasure talking with you. Everyone, make sure you check out High Res Pod at, what's the website again?
Well, it was highresPod.com and at highresPod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. New episode out every 2 weeks. We're off this week. We got a new one coming out the next week, though, with Rashid Zakat.
And that probably means nothing in the time when this is actually posted, because timey-wimey.
Just check out highresPod.com. We're on iTunes, Google Play, all the channels, Stitcher, SoundCloud. You can find us. For sure.
And make sure you check out the Philadelphia Podcast Fest. That's what this show is all about this month. Philadelphia Podcast Fest is going to be held at multiple venues. Tattooed Moms, Bridge That Sounds, Amalgam Comics and Coffee House, KTG, or Kitchen Table Gallery, I believe is the full name for it. And that's where you can find Ryan's show on July 22nd at 3 p.m., if I remember correctly.
That's right.
And make sure you, of course, the weekend before, check out Everything is Awesome Late Night when we go live at Tattooed Moms on July 16th. From 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. We're going to have Brian Durkin as our stand-up comedian that night. Mike D'Angelo will be there to be my co-host. It's my birthday weekend, so who knows what... I'm probably going to be drunk, let's be honest. At 2, I'm going to have a couple beers in me by then. I'm so excited for it. If you want to hang out and just meet with me and some of the other podcasters, I know I'll be at Tattooed Moms on the 15th and 16th, kind of helping managing things. So come check me out there. Check Ryan out at his live podcast fest on the 22nd on highresPod.com and all the fun places that he already mentioned. You can find me on Twitter at ThatNerdyKev. You can find this show on Twitter at RealAwesomePod. You can find us on the interwebs, awesomepodcast.com. We're part of the Core Temp Arts Podcast Network on CoreTempArts.com. For Everything is Awesome, I'm Kev, and we've been awesome.
Thank you for listening to the Core Temp Arts Podcast Network. To listen to more Core Temp Arts shows, visit CoreTempArts.com.